Good morning, this is Jeff, or I should say good afternoon. This is Jeff with Sewer Tech Northwest. We are at property address 17710 Southeast Mill Street here in Portland. We're located just to the left of the front doorway. I describe everything as if you're standing in the street facing the front door. So we're sitting, it's probably not even quite a foot to the left of the decking here, but approximately about 1 foot to the left of the deck and about a foot out from the house. You've got a 4-inch ABS clean out. Water's running. We're going to zero the foot counter out at the base of the clean out. Off we go. We're going to take a look at this joint on the way out. There's an offset there. There's also some stuff hanging from the top of the pipe. Could be cobwebs, could also be roots. The clean out access was loaded full of cobwebs, so it might just be an extension of that. And you had a little bit of a deformation about 3 feet into the line. We'll get a nicer shot of that once the line's drained out. Little bump in the flow line or lump. Likely where the pipe is resting on top of a larger river rock or something of that nature. Plastic was intact there. It's too small to do anything, but we will take a second look at that. Just transition there over to 4-inch 3034. One thing these folks are doing in spades is keeping this line spiffy clean. You don't get a line that clean unless you've got really good habits in place, mostly not putting cooking oil and grease down the line. Fats in general. This is slightly dirtier than a brand new construction sewer line. Looks fantastic in that regard. And after 13 years and almost 25,000 sewer scopes, I honestly get more concerned about grease buildup than I do a lot of structural issues like bellies, things of that nature. It's often thick grease buildup building up in and around a structural defect that often actually turns it into a real problem. It's a very common issue in a lot of households. Well, anyway, there's the main there at about 53 feet. I'm going to back the camera up just a little bit here just to get a better locate. We're sitting just in front of the main there. All right, we're going to go locate really quick while the pipe drains off, and we'll take another look at things as we come back. All right, I located the camera head successfully. By the time the line crosses the street curb, it's very, very near where the for sale sign post is, which is about 8 feet to the left of the mailbox. That's as you face the house from the street. The line makes its way out to the street through the front yard in its entirety, which is really nice. Don't have any piping here, at least on property, that's under any kind of concrete. That's a fabulous setup. If you ever have to do repairs on this thing for some reason or another, you're never going to have to go cracking into concrete. Everything from the curb out in Multnomah County is city responsibility. Get to leave that fun stuff for them. Anyhow, if you want to keep your line this clean, which I highly recommend doing, especially if you have little kids in the household that are still learning how to fold toilet paper and are wadding their toilet paper up like a softball, as kind of a rule of thumb, if you have enough grease or oil on your pans, this is when the pans are hot or warm anyway. If you were to turn the pan sideways and there's enough on it that it runs off the pan in beads or flows off the pan, it's at that point you want to do something about it. Let the pan cool down, wipe it out with a paper towel, or pour the grease into a jar. Something of that nature. Don't pour it into a trash can when it's hot, or it'll melt a hole through the trash can. You just don't want it going down the line. Real quick, that joint there is just slightly out of whack. It's so minor it's not even going on my report. It's like about a 1/16 of an inch out of plumb there. It's very minor. Horizontal offset. Anyhow, a thin little coating of PAM spray on your pans is no big deal. Hot water and soap handles that just fine. The key to helping to keep the line clean when you're washing dirty dishes, always use hot water, as hot as you can get it, and let that hot water run for about another minute after you've washed your last dish. That helps to ensure that everything that's melted remains that way until it gets to the main or close to it. So you've got a little deform. I will notate this on the report. The plastic there does not show any white stress marks on it. If the plastic starts to turn white, that's where I get more concerned, where it looks like the pipe splitting open is imminent, you know, and that's possible at some point in time. It may happen. It's impossible to know what's actually caused this. Sometimes this stuff is the defect is caused and there's no underlying cause to it in the ground any longer. And then other times you've got a rock sitting under the pipe that's kind of, the pipe's deformed around. But in a lot of cases, these things often never amount to anything. Only time will tell. As it sits right now, you've got a minor little deform in the flow line. And the other factor that can play into this too is if the line was ever sleeved, if they ever sleeved a line down the middle of an older, larger line, sometimes you'll get a deformation if there was ever excess pipe grout in an old concrete joint or an offset joint, something of that nature. You'll end up with a deformation, and rarely does it ever turn into anything because it's not generally a progressive scenario in those cases. As it sits right now, that's not affecting functionality, and the plastic there is intact. So you do have an offset joint here right as we drop in. That's what I'm trying to get a gander at, is that junk hanging down from the top of the pipe. It is a really tricky spot to get a look at. The camera, this is just so close to where we drop into the line here. Yeah, there's enough thickness to that right there. If you look really close, I mean, some of that certainly is cobwebs, but if you look off to the kind of the right side of that bunch of junk, there's a lot of thin little dark strands in there. That looks like you've got a root intrusion that's begun there. So I am going to recommend a fix on this. You've got both an offset joint there and what appears to be a root intrusion. The offset joint, because of its proximity to the home, is one I would recommend fixing anyway. But when you look at how thick that stuff is, I just mentioned a moment ago how many lines I've cambered. I've seen thousands and thousands of root intrusions. And the way that's displaying itself looks like a root intrusion. Generally, cobwebs are never going to be that thick, but they're also going to be bleached out white in color. You're not going to have all that dark, thick, stringy junk in and amongst it. That looks like a root ball coming through there. So the plus side is, this is immediately upon access. I'll locate and mark this really quick, but you're probably not much deeper than 2.5 feet deep here under dirt. All right, depth here I'm getting is 2 feet deep on the nose. You'll see a green X marking. This is sitting just, I mean, barely a foot away from the clean out. All right, now going backwards into the house right now, just to get to the foundation wall. Everything beyond this point right here is all exposed piping in the crawl space. Well, this is such a, we're just gonna take it all the way. I normally don't go this far back into a house, but this is an easy straight shot to the back. Man, is this thing clean. Looks amazing. And so that light at the end of the tunnel there, kind of at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, that's the sky we're looking at. We're looking up through the roof vent right now at the sky. That's the back end most part of the line right there. Nice looking line on the interior. This thing is incredibly clean. As it sits right now, the line is still a functioning sewer line, but with the offset and the root intrusion there, it's something that needs to be dealt with so the line remains that way. The offset joint is also a hard obstruction. The last thing you want to have is a combination of a hard obstruction in the flow line and a root intrusion all in one location. That's not a good combo to have, especially if those roots continue to grow and turn into something bigger. Most likely the culprit here is this bush that's sitting right next to the clean out. So, and that green dot right there is where the root intrusion is. So after repairs are completed, make sure you do a rescope, and you want to do the rescope when the trench is closed to make sure that there are no settling issues occur like the offset joint you've got there. This line, for instance, had you scoped it before you buried it, the offset joint would not have been there. So that's the importance in making sure when you do a rescope, the line has a load on top of it. Otherwise, everything you're looking at is in theory. So beyond that, to reiterate, the deformation at about 5 feet out is too minor, in my opinion, to require repairs, especially being that the plastic is completely intact and the little lump there is too small to affect functionality. So it might be worth, you know, taking another look at that thing in a few years to see if there's any progression that's taking place. I think it's unlikely you're going to see that, but it's hard to say. Again, the plus side here is the line is very, very shallow. It's all under dirt, so if that ever does need fixing down the road at some point, it's very simple to do so. Very similar to the root intrusion. You're not going to be much deeper than about 2 to 2.5 feet deep there if it ever actually needs it. Otherwise, you know, aside from the root intruded offset joint there, rest of the line's intact, has good flow, and is functioning properly at this time. Overall, the line is draining slower as it sits right now due to the offset joint and the inevitable roots that are gonna at some point grow down and get into the flow line. After repairs are done, you'll have proper flow.